Hey there, readers and adventurers.
And welcome back to Becca's Book Club Adventure. I'm Becca.
And I'm Matt.
And we're so glad you're here to escape reality with us as we dive into our favorite stories, characters, and fantasy worlds.
This evening, we wanted to touch on a little bit of fantasy news, but more importantly, hit up a book review.
But before we get to that, we need to pause and acknowledge the sponsor of this episode.
That's right. This week's episode is brought to you by coffee. That's right, coffee. Drink it hot, drink it cold, drink it bitter, drink it sweet. It's the magical drink that single-handedly allows you to live while simultaneously enhancing the awful parts of said living. Goes great with, let's be real, everything. It goes great with everything. Side effects may include increased anxiety, alertness, productivity, the ability to be alive, diarrhea, and existential dread. Use as directed.
I am not sure where this comes from in your brain. But I am led to believe a new season of TV from your favorite book series was just released. And you finished reading my Christmas gift I gave to you.
Yes. So, if you read, you didn't read this shit, but if you listened to our previous episode, you'll know that I was introduced to the fantasy world and have read The Wheel of Time without pause for like 26, 27 years. And just a few days ago, the third season came out with its first 3 episodes on Amazon Prime. I really liked them. I was excited for season 1 because I finally got to see the people that I considered my friends when my life was not so great to be like visualized on the screen for the first time, and that was so cool. I wasn't a huge fan of season 1 and season 2 though, and I don't think that that's because they were bad. I think that was more because season 1 had like the pandemic hit in the very middle of filming, so they had to take a pause and they had to come back, but they couldn't have the same amount of personnel, so they had to rely on CGI, and then the writer's strike happened in season 2. And so like I felt like the writing in season 2 and the storytelling was just sort of not great. But so far, season 3 is awesome. I don't really want to jump into my thoughts on it too much until I've seen the entire season, because like you never know how the things that they set up and are awesome in the beginning like pay off or don't pay off or shit the bed later on in the season. So we'll just have to like wait to talk about this one, but I wanted to acknowledge that it's out there, and I think that anybody that hasn't seen it should give it a try. But,
Sounds like I got some homework.
Yes. That's a commitment. We'll talk about it. But in the meantime, I did read Lamentation by Ken Scholes, which you bought me for Christmas. So we'll start there. You got me this book for Christmas. It was published in 2009. It's about 370 pages or so. At least the hardback version is, and that's the one you got me. It's called Lamentation by Ken Scholes. It's apparently book 1 of 5 in a series called Psalms of Isaak. As I think, I'm pretty sure it's the debut novel from this author. So I gotta ask, where the hell did you find this thing?
So I should probably start with, that's actually more information than I even knew about this book when I gave it to you. When you said it was 370 pages, I was like, it looked way thicker than that. So for Christmas this year, I had decided I was going to thrift gifts for Christmas just so we could keep costs low, we could be a little environmentally friendly. And I was at the public library one day, and they have like a bargain book bin section, and all the books are 50 cents. And it's on donation only. And so I found this book about all the Bordeaux wines, and I was like, that's a Matt book. It's facts It's about wine. It's about a subspecies of wine. There's probably an inordinate amount of facts in this little textbook of a book. So then at that point, I was pulling $1 out of my pocket to pay for it. So I was like, I'll find another book that might fit Matt's vibe to go with him. And so I pulled out this book, and on cover alone, I was like, this could be really good or really bad. We'll let Matt decide.
Okay, so you found it in a bin of books.
Yep.
You bought it based on the cover, which we're not even going to state the obvious about judging a book on its cover. Okay, so you don't know anything about the book. All right, so the book drops you immediately into a problem. Like, so I'm sure with a lot of fantasy books that you've read and I've read, it almost, a lot of those books start with just like everyday chores, and you're getting to know the character and their world, and there's like 10 chapters of literal just exposition and info dumps and world building and character building. But
if
this
it's a fact one, it'll be chapter 3.
Yeah. But this one just drops you right in. And then all of that exposition and everything is kind of like gleaned along the way while you're reading. So very atypical from the typical epic fantasy, at least the ones that I've read. So let me give you a little bit of an overview of this book. So the book never explicitly says, but I believe the story takes place in a version of our world. But okay. I think like the Wheel of Time is cool because it takes place in a version of our world where things like the moon landing is like a story that people tell their kids, but it's sort of like how you and I would talk about ancient Egypt, where we sort of know the names, but we mispronounce them, and we have zero of the facts, but we try to piece this narrative together anyway. So like in the Wheel of Time, there's this person named Lynn who travels to the moon in the belly of an eagle made of fire. This kind of a myth, right? Okay, so with this book, I think it's like another 5,000 years past that point, where our current time is forgotten 1,000%.
Mesopotamia.
And, yeah, whatever is happening like 2,000 or 3,000 years in our future is like our version of 5,000 BC. Okay. In this world, the story focuses on a specific continent that they name that is called, very originally, the Named Lands. And it is comprised of several different nations or city-states or countries. That nomenclature isn't there, but that's the kind of concept, right? These different, I'm going to call them nations for lack of a better word, have like markedly separate vibes, very unique ways of dressing, speaking, warring, etc. Like you almost have like Europe meets like the Romanov gypsies meets a version of the United States meets a version of the Middle East, like all like meets like Rome,
like the different planets of Star Wars.
Yes, but in a much smaller geographic setting.
Yes.
Okay, so one of the things that ties all of these countries together is that they all have like ready access to magic. But in this world, magic isn't like conjured or wielded from some type of internal or worldly force that comes from the earth or something like another. It is all magic comes from ingested powders.
Like food? Like magic mushrooms?
Not food per se, but if you can think of somebody with like a bowl and the pestle and they're grinding stuff into powder, yes, that.
Okay.
Like apothecary powders.
Like an elixir kind of situation.
Yeah. But it's like magic dust almost that you like throw on yourself and shit. So these magic powders, there's like one to make you invisible, and there's one to make you fast, and there's one to make you silent, and there's one that makes your voice stretch across the entire world. These kinds of things, right? So the powders can be applied to anything that's animate, so humans, animals, whatever. So like if you can picture putting a powder on yourself that makes you faster, stronger, invisible, and silent, and you do that to you and your horse, then you can cover like 100 miles on a horse in like 4 hours or something crazy, and then nobody knows you're coming, right? Separate from these lands, but holding them all together, is the city of Windweir, which is the home of the Andro-Francine order. Think of this city as Rome,
Okay.
and the Andro-Francine order as like the Catholic Church that lives in Rome, right? So it's, but in this futuristic thing, their religion is knowledge. So these people have been they're trying to gather all of the knowledge of the world and invent stuff based upon this knowledge, and it's very like steampunk. With me so far?
I'm still struggling as a pharmacist with the powders, but I'm following along.
Okay, so that's some overview that takes you like the entire book to learn, but I think is super interesting. It's non-spoiler anything, but like you're not given that up front, right?
Okay.
So now I'll get into how the book starts.
I do
So-
like that when books take a long time for you to figure out what the fuck is going on.
The story opens with the city of Windweir being 110% destroyed by some unknown ancient weapon that results in like a pillar of flames that turns into a pillar of smoke that the entire world can see. Like, I was immediately visualizing like dropping the atomic bomb on Japan in World War II with that mushroom cloud type of effect. Or like the 9/11 when the plane flew into the World Trade Center and explosion that everybody can see in this. Anyways, that kind of a thing. So that is literally the first paragraph of page 1. Nothing of the city remains except for the bones of its inhabitants, because as you would probably know from science, bones don't burn, they don't melt, whatever. They just get the kind of charred. Otherwise, the city stood there is completely barren, and there's just an enormous scorch mark where the city used to be. Okay, now enter our band of characters. Now that we've all been completely traumatized, we get to meet the people that are going to cope. So I wrote this out of my brain. So if anybody has read this book, please don't come at me if I get the order of how we meet people wrong. All right, so first we meet Lord Rudolfo. He's a really smart, calculated, like ruthless king who's also like kind of a dandy with how he dresses, and he's oozing with charm and charisma. He rules the forest gypsies, which, how awesome is that? And anyway, so okay, he sees the pillar of smoke, and he has an alliance going on with the Andro-Francine order. So he gathers his army and starts to ride towards this city because he thinks they're in trouble and they need help.
Logical.
Immediately, everything that's written about this dude is you're supposed to like this guy.
Makes me immediately hate characters.
There you go. Okay, second one that comes to mind. We go back to the city, and just outside of the city, we meet like a 15-year-old boy named Neb. Neb is, or I guess was, an apprentice in the Andro-Francine order who was waiting outside the city walls to meet his father to go on some type of day outing. And his world is destroyed and he sees it. And so the kid is like, as far as we know, the only living survivor of this city.
Classic fantasy story.
Of course. And of course he's 15. And that's how you meet Neb. So next we meet an old dude who's a fisherman named Petros.
I see we have no female characters yet.
No, not yet. Petros is disturbed by the pillar of smoke that he sees over yonder. And he needs to go see it for himself. He's very disturbed by it for a couple of days. So he leaves a note on his door for whomever might stop by wanting to know where he is. And he just sort of decides to go see it. Petros, to me, is very clearly like the Gandalf wise old man archetype. But we don't know anything about him when we meet him. We don't know jack shit about this dude for a long time, right? And he's so interesting because he
becomes a swindler, doesn't he?
He's smart, he's wise, he's educated, but he's just like an old fisherman dude. Like, what? And now he has to go like check out this thing that like any sensible person would ride the other direction from. Fascinating. Next, we cut over to like a military camp, and we meet this fat dictator dude named Sethbert, who's marching his army towards Windweir, and halts his army and says, "Everybody watch this." And then you see a huge pillar of flame and smoke happen.
So we have our villain?
That's what you're led to believe, yes. He's super fat, and the author likes to harp on that. And he's also named Sethbert. I don't know if anybody has read the comic strip called Dilbert. But like you're immediately like Sethbert. What are you, like a combination of Dilbert and Dogbert? Like Dogbert's like evilness and Dilbert's jaded, I hate the world, everybody's stupid kind of concepts. That's immediately what brought to my mind. With Sethbert, enter first female character.
Ooh.
You meet his consort.
Always a consort.
He is an asshole to her. Well, he's an asshole to everybody, but especially to her. And even though it was like an arranged marriage between two very powerful nations and houses, right? One would think that she's more of a dictator-ess or princess or queen or something. But no, to him, she's his consort, and he treats her like a whore, and that is horrible. Her name is Jin Lee Tam. She is like 6 feet tall, red hair, super athletic. So you know some shit's going to go down with this one. But Sethbert's an asshole. We're supposed to think he's an asshole. The world revolves around assholes. Okay, so last thing that I'll say about the intro to this story is as Rudolfo gets to the city, he finds yet another survivor. A metal, like aluminum, steel, metal man, right? Steampunk. This metal man was created by the Andro Francemes, and he seems to know how the city was destroyed. I kept picturing some version of the Tin Man from Wizard of Oz, but with like a steampunk aesthetic and C-3PO computing capabilities. Very cool. And as Sethbert's army gets closer to the city, Sethbert finds Neb, the only living survivor, and Sethbert needs to know what Neb knows and captures him. And so now we have these two armies poised outside of the like atomic desolation of a city, both with what they think of as the only known survivor of said city. And shit's going to go down. All right. So that's sort of like the intro to this book. With me? What do you think?
I think I'm with you. This kind of sounds exciting. I was a little skeptical at first, but it sounds like we have our classic teenage boy hero survivor persona. We've got our gypsy king who might be, the perfect person, or that little craziness that's going to come out later. We have our crazy dictator who also has a consort who I pray has a perfect right hook, an old man, and then a robot. So that's all you need, right, for a story? 1 woman, 6 men, should be good.
Yes, exactly. Plus, there's a whole bunch of other characters that you meet along the way, sort of like you get to know the Andro-Francine order more, because obviously there are survivors from the city that weren't in the fucking city, Anyways. Okay, so all those main characters meet around Windweir with their armies and whatever, and through the arc of war, because you have to have armies, it's like Chekhov's gun. If there's an army, it's got to be used, right?
Yeah.
We navigate how the world is going to recover from literally all of its documented knowledge being lost and destroyed. That's what the Andro-Francine order did, was they collected all of the knowledge and they hoarded it. So that's all been destroyed and lost. So who destroyed the city? Why did they destroy the city? How does the world recover from this? What are the politics of the world? Who's pulling all of the marionette strings? And of course, there's got to be love, right? You can't have war without love. So that's sort of then how the book happens.
Okay, so pretty straightforward as far as it seems. Did you like it? Or maybe the better question is, what did it get right? What did it get wrong?
Okay. Good questions. Loaded. That's a loaded baked potato. But what did I like? What did I not like? Let's start with a couple of things that I didn't care for. It's pretty short for an epic fantasy novel.
370 pages.
370 pages. It's relatively short. The history is extremely complex. But because it's all piecemealed, it's kind of hard to keep terms straight, and there's not enough time for exposition because of the brevity of everything. So you can get kind of lost and confused in the history, and you end up thinking of history in broad strokes rather than actually understanding what they're talking about. They have this steampunk world with machines and engines, but the logistics of the world is really weird. Why do you have this steampunk society, but you're still communicating with each other with birds?
Because it's steampunk.
But so in Harry Potter they use owls, and in Game of Thrones they send ravens. So it's in these other worlds, right? Or in the Wheel of Time, they will send messenger pigeons, right? In all these different worlds, they seem to have one species of bird, and they train the crap out of it. But in this one, they use all birds, all of the birds. No bird is left on to its own devices, right? The color, because the color of the bird matters to the message. The color of the bird gives context. There will be a color for war, and a color for peace, and a color for alliance, and a color for parlay, and stuff all these things, right? So I just have questions about the logistics here. How are all of these birds trained? That is just a little ridiculous. But more to the point, when you're going to war, how do you bring all of these birds with you? How? Because they're in the middle of battle. So in typical medieval crap, you're hey, peon soldier, get on your horse and go find the general and give him a message for me. These dudes just pull a bird out of their pocket or out of the panty or carrier on their back, and they write a message out and they send it off to their general. Who the hell is the bird carrier marching into war? Like, how many birds do you have to have for all contingencies? And like
Right.
logistically, this is just what?
Are they trained to whistles? And if so, how many sounds do we need in order to get all the different bird types?
Exactly. Okay. And so then more with logistics on communication. There seems to be a lot of ciphers and coded messages. But in the book, there is not one single message that is not coded. So if all messages are coded, then like no messages are coded. You know what I'm trying
Then
to
it's
say?
a new language.
Yeah. And like Rudolfo, for example, is able to communicate these coded messages with like 8 different nations and peoples. How do you know all of these things? And if you know all of these things, don't just everybody know all of these things? And at that point, what's the point of the code? Are we just concerned that like a stupid peon fisherman who's never been educated is going to find the message and then won't be able to read it? I don't know. Anyway, so I guess what I'm saying is the logistics of communication, I don't feel were very thought out, especially given the fact that we're in like a steampunk type of age. Okay, third thing I didn't like. The pacing and the timing of the story was mixed. So, when events are happening, when shit's going down, you'll switch POVs like a dozen times within a 24-hour period. But
That's rough.
but like it works. I can follow it, right? But then like
Okay.
when the shenanigans are done, the next chapter will cover the next 4 months.
With one
So-
character.
Yeah, with maybe 2, but yeah, like with 1. And then because of these different time lapses, like all the leaders of the different factions seem to be completely up to date with their knowledge. Which is fine, except for the fact that knowledge is communicated via bird, and birds are not instantaneous. There's no flu powder taking the bird from point A to point B immediately.
You
So-
said there was powder magic, so maybe there is flu powder.
You know what? Maybe they have powderized all of these birds and they're just flying all over the place and zipping all over everywhere. That's a good point. But it's hard to know because the pacing is so varied.
Do you get each of these characters' points of view throughout the story that you
Yes.
had introduced?
Yes.
Okay, that's a lot of
Plus-
point of views for 370 pages.
Well, there are more point of views to characters that come in like halfway through the book.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay. So because of the varying pacing, there were a lot of times where I had to stop and go, wait, where in the F are we on the calendar? Which I don't think is very great. Anyway, all right. So those are just 3 things that I had a little bit of beef with. And you'll notice that they're pretty nitpicky. Like, I don't have a problem with any of the character archetypes or tropes. I don't have any beef with anything sexual. I don't have beef with, like, the politics or the story. It's all of these just little in-world
The major
things.
plot line.
So, like, what it got right, the characters are awesome. Some of them are very, very detailed and deep, and some of them are very enigmatic and mysterious, and yet others are the kind of mustache twirling, cartoonish villains. So you have like a really good mix, and they all play off of each other really, really well. The politics of the world is probably the most fascinating part of the entire book. They're really, really easily understood, but it's clouded in mystery, and it's doled out little by little throughout the entire book, which is fantastic. And then there seem to be people that are manipulating the politics. So if you like are a conspiracy theorist in our world, you can think of like the deep state pulling the strings of like Washington or wherever. So like that's really, really fascinating. And I really love the magic system. I love it because it's so unique. I've never read anything like that before. So those are the three things that I really, really, really liked.
Okay, so you have three positives, three cons. So you sound a little conflicted. Would you recommend this book, and where would you rate it?
Well, on Storygraph, that's right, I said Storygraph, everybody. Forget Goodreads, Storygraph. I originally gave this a 2.5 out of 5 rating. And after having it like sit with me a little bit, I went back in and I updated that to a 3.
Oh.
So here's what I'll say. I think that the story itself is rated much higher than a 3. But like, I think that the lore and writing and pacing is a little bit lower than a 3, which is why I settled on a midpoint of a 3. I'm not 100% sure if it's the author's debut novel or not, but if it is, that would explain a lot of my gripes. That being said, it was very unique. It was a breath of fresh air. If you're looking for the next Wheel of Time, Throne of Glass, Lord of the Rings, ACOTAR, Malazan, whatever, don't read this right now. That's not what this is. Granted, I've only read the first book out of 5, so like maybe that's what it turns into. But if you're looking to just like explore the fantasy genre, if you want like a quick read that you can read in a weekend, if you want a palate cleanser, definitely I would 1000% recommend to pick this book up and give it a shot. I think one of what I wrote on Storygraph with my review was, this book is good enough that I definitely want to read the next one.
Okay.
But not good enough that I'm going to do that immediately.
Okay.
Okay, so based upon everything that I've said, what do you think? What does your gut tell you? What would you do with it?
Well, I think I should back up. And so I bought this book based off of its cover, right? And on the cover, so it's this red maroon color book sleeve that goes around it, and it has this artwork, and if I remember correctly, it's kind of a Romanesque piece of artwork, and it's got this white horse on the front of it that's kind of rearing with like the king and the war. So I didn't get any steampunk vibes from that artwork. So because I wasn't interested in the cover, and now I know that the cover has nothing to do with the plot line, I think I might actually read it. At 370 pages and a lot of characters like that, I think that would be worth reading.
All right. Do you want me to bring it down the next time I'm at your house?
Yeah, actually.
Yeah? Okay. I will. All right. So that is my review of Lamentation by Ken Scholes. And apparently I convinced Becca to read it, so it must not be half bad. If you, readers and adventurers out there, have read Lamentations, hit me up. Do you agree or disagree with like what I think? Was your experience, like what was your experience? What's your opinion? Like I would love to know.
And you can email us at bookclubbybecca@gmail.com, or you can find us on Instagram at Becca's Book Club Adventure, all one word, all lowercase.
And if you haven't read the book, send us some feedback. Let us know if you read it and what you think, or if there are other book recommendations or anything else that you would say. We would love to hear from you, and we might even feature you on next week's episode.
Speaking of which, next week on Becca's Book Club Adventure, we'll feature our synopsis and reactions to the first chunk of House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas.
So, until next time, keep drinking that coffee and keep reading.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.